These are the problems we're going to talk about today: corns, fungus, hammer toes, bunions, fallen arches, and ingrown nails. These are just the ones I see commonly. If you have a particular problem you want to talk about, come and talk to me afterwards. I'll be happy to talk about you in detail about whatever problem it is you have. But these are the ones I see a lot of. Corns. Corns are nothing but calluses that happen on the toes, okay? And they, depending on who you quote, usually corns are things that happen between the toes. If they're on the outside of the top or bottom, we typically don't refer to those as corns. So they occur because toes are rubbing against each other, or one of them has a bump that's rubbing on the other one. Shoes oftentimes are the culprit because they don't have enough room and they're all being squished together. And my usual first line of treatment is this: a gel sleeve. Very simple, buy them anywhere. And they're reusable, washable. They're a little pricey, $5 for two. These are the only ones I found that I can consistently keep on people. They slide them on, they stay on for most people. I have a few people who've told me they can't keep them on, and there's another type that I use, which are spacers. They look like a kind of like a comma, and they're made out of foam and they slide in. Some people, those work a little bit better. But these work really well at padding those corns. And basically, you wear them till the corn goes away, and you stop wearing them, the corn will come back, and you just keep doing that, you know. And if you can control it that way, really the corn surgery, it's not much of a surgery, but it has some downsides: stiff toes, scars, those type of things. So we really try to avoid that, and I very rarely end up having to do surgery for that. Fungus, there are two conditions that pretty much are the same thing, except they look different. One is athlete's foot, or tinea pedis, and the other is thick nails. All right, they're just fungus infections in the foot. There's no rhyme or reason why one person gets it and another person doesn't. The bug is everywhere. You can't avoid it. You probably carry it normally. So it's extremely common. It exists everywhere. For the skin, I like the Lotrimin lotion. It's actually, or the cream, one of those two. The spray is a little more convenient, but I'm not sure you get quite as good a dosing. And I've had better luck with the ointment and the creams. And then for the nails, there's a lot of therapies out there. Every time you open a magazine, there's someone touting something. Tea tree oil, banana peels. There are topicals that you brush on. A lot of these things are effective while you're doing them. And as long as you're willing to do them for life, they may work for you. Okay? But as soon as you stop using them, it will come back. And so really the only treatment that's been shown to have long-term effectiveness is Lamisil as a pulse treatment. You take it for a week, you stop for 3 weeks, you take it for a week, you stop for 3 weeks. And the reason is because the stuff is really harsh on the liver. Now, in my practice, I don't use it a lot because it's expensive. It can hurt the liver. It's really a cosmetic problem mostly. And finally, 70% of the people are cured after 2 years. 2 years later, they go back and look at the people. 70% are cured. That means 3 out of 10, it came back. Okay? It just doesn't seem like a win-win situation to me. And so I rarely treat these. I do occasionally, with people who have trouble with ingrown nails and stuff like that, we'll try this, but it's real rare that I actually do it. But that is probably the most reasonable treatment out there. Hammer toes, this is a muscle imbalance. It causes the toe to what we call cock up. You can see the toe makes this kind of zigzag. And the real problem with this is a shoe pushes down here and up here. So you end up with two parts that hurt, and they're being squeezed in the shoe. All right? And the basic treatment, if you're not going to, do anything else, is you get a shoe that's big enough, and you put a strap on the bottom that holds this part down. And I like this kind of broad, kind of felt or gel material with a little elastic loop that goes up and holds the toe down. You pull this down, this kind of just extends because the soft tissues will relax. And you can actually do quite well with this. If you get to the point where this doesn't work for you anymore, then we can talk about the surgery. It's kind of an involved surgery. It involves fusing joints and things like that. So it's not something you really want unless you can't avoid it any other way. Bunions, There are two flavors of bunions. There are people who had them from when they were like 16, and these tend to be stable and not progress, and these tend to be the genetic ones. The other ones are caused by footwear, wear and tear, damage that occurs within the ligaments that support the toe, and they tend to progress. They get worse and worse every single year, and they just keep getting worse. And they can affect the other toes, and that's usually the point where I tell people, maybe you ought to have it fixed, is when it starts beating up on the toe next to it, okay? I think it's more reasonable at that point than at another point to work on the toe. And wide shoes are the usual treatment for bunions. I think that kind of goes without saying. And they sell a lot of braces and stuff out there for bunions. Can help with that pain that's over the bump on the inside. If you wear them at night, it kind of relaxes those tissues. It will not cure a bunion. It will not slow the bunion's progression down. All it can do is help a little bit with the pain. Falling arches. This is really a muscle strength issue. A lot of times it's accompanied by tendon pain and damage, and it tends to be progressive. Because once that arch starts to fall, the heel kicks out, and the ability of the foot to lock like it's supposed to, where the bones get stiff for forward gait, doesn't happen anymore. And so you're actually stressing the ligaments more and more the flatter and flatter your foot gets. And the foot just keeps getting worse and worse. If it gets bad enough and lasts long enough, you even get arthritis on the joints. And so they can become an absolutely miserable condition. If we see it early enough, then the treatment is special orthotics and exercises. If we see it later, then the surgery is to rebuild the muscles, okay, to try to correct it by just doing soft tissue work. But if we get to it when the arthritis is there, what I have to do is I have to fuse all the joints of the foot and make it one big rigid piece of bone. And that's not fun, all right? Not for me and not for the patient. So really, this is something that I'd rather see earlier than later. Typically what happens is people start having pain that comes around the bump on the inside of the foot, and their arch starts getting flatter and flatter and flatter. That's something that probably we ought to see sooner than later, like some of the other stuff we can put off. This isn't one I'd like to put off. Ingrown nails, once again, cut the nail straight across, reduces the incidence of this. You can support the nail edges if you have a tendency towards this. Little pieces of cotton, pulling the little wedging in there, kind of pulling the edges of the nail up. That works pretty good at trying to treat this for people where it's recurrent. The wider the shoe, does this seem to be a mantra of mine about the wider shoes? Tend to help, okay? The surgery here is actually quite effective, and it's not that big a deal. There's two flavors of surgery. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I go in and scrape down the bone and get rid of the root. A lot of people go in, they take the nail out, and then they put either chemicals or they use lasers to kill the root. They work about equivalently. There's not a big difference between them. I just have trouble putting poison on people's feet. I'd rather do it mechanically by scraping. But it actually works real well. My usual indication is someone has multiple infections a year from an ingrown nail. That's my point where I say you probably ought to have it fixed. If you get one every 2 or 3 years, I wouldn't worry about it, okay? Probably the cure is worse than the disease at that point. Some things that people ask me about that are questionable, meaning I don't really like them. Reflexology. Feels great, has no science to it. You aren't going to cure someone's sinus infection by rubbing on their foot. Topical nail treatments. There are some that have some anecdotal treatment successes, but in general, they're not really going to work for most people unless you use them for the rest of your life. There are surgeons out there talking about people who have nerve damage going in and rebuilding the nerves by decompressing them the whole length of the nerve. They basically fillet the nerve from your butt all the way down to your toes to give it room. Hasn't had good science behind it, and they're doing it really a big time up in the Northeast. Lasers for nerve and nail problems. Really, there's no point in using a laser for either of these things because it's really overkill. And if they don't do it right, it just makes any future surgery miserable, and especially the nerve. Basically what they try to do is blindly put this high-powered laser in your foot and kill the nerve by just kind of hoping they're in the right place. And then if I have to come back and revise it, it's just, you can't even tell what's what. It's all scar. And so I really don't like the laser for that purpose. Ultrasound for the heel, there's two reasons to use ultrasound for the heel. One is to see how much bone density you have. You've probably seen that at drugstores and stuff for screening for osteoporosis. If you're worried about osteoporosis, get a full DEXA scan. This is completely unreliable for hip and back fractures. All it will tell you is what happens to be in that heel. The other use for ultrasound is to cure heel pain for people who the stretches don't work for. Try the stretches first. But there are two flavors there. There's low power, which people do in your office, and they just kind of rub this thing on you. It doesn't work. There's high power ones that seem to work pretty well in the literature, but you got to be asleep for those because they hurt like the dickens. They're the same machine we use to break kidney stones up. This is a new one. I hadn't seen this before. Someone brought this in and said, so should I do this? And so it's called foot detoxing. They make it with pads you put on your foot, and they also make this thing where they put your foot in a water bath and they hook you up to electrodes, and it makes the water bubble and all this stuff, and the water turns black. And it's like, okay, well, if you can really pull the toxins out of someone's body through their feet, dialysis clinics will be out of business. So I was curious about this. And I went online, and this is it's kind of blurry here, but this is a YouTube where the guy does the treatment, 20 minutes long, on a carrot. An organic carrot, he says. There's no label on it, so I don't know for sure. And guess what? The carrot made the water turn just as black and dirty and nasty as his feet did. So I don't know what's going on here, but I don't think that carrot had that much toxins in it. Now, all these things, the reflexology, this foot bath, all these things, if it makes you feel better, basically it's a spa treatment, and what you're paying for is for something that feels nice. Don't think you're curing any toxins in your system, but if you like it, it's not going to hurt you. There are some resources on the bottom of the handout. The AOFAS is the American Orthopedic Foot and Ankle Society. It has information about shoe fitting and finding shoes for different athletic pursuits, a little bit about some foot problems in there, but not a whole lot. The AAOS is the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons. They have some foot information about particular foot deformities like bunions and stuff. If you're proficient on the web, that's a wonderful place to go. I put my website in there. Unfortunately, it's a little bit on the, I haven't updated in a while side, but it also has links to those other two sites. There's the link to Texas Tech Orthopedics on there. For some reason you want to find us, it's listed there. And then the only commercial plug I have, and I have no financial interest in this at all, I just use these people a lot, is Right Way Medical on 82nd Street. They have a huge selection of foot supplies, orthotics, diabetic shoes, wide toe box shoes, rocker bottom shoes. And they have two people that work there that are what are called podorthists. And podorthists are people who are trained at fitting shoes, orthotics, bunion pads, things like that. And so if for some reason you have a question about, well, is this orthotic or this orthotic better for me? Yeah, it's going to cost a little more if you go to Right Way, but you will have someone that has some knowledge about these things to help you pick them out. Okay? And if you are interested in buying shoes that are designed for foot problems, that have wide toe boxes and stuff like that, they have a wonderful selection and they can help you with picking out those shoes. Well, thank you all for your time.
This program is intended for the private use of health.edu subscribers. Any rebroadcast or redistribution without the express written permission of health.edu is prohibited.